Officer Michael Hale sat in his patrol car, parked in his usual spot on the outskirts of a bustling southern town. The midday sun bore down, making the heat shimmer on the asphalt. He sipped his lukewarm coffee, scanning the streets for any sign of trouble. Hale had spent over a decade patrolling these streets, and while he had long seen himself as an enforcer of order, many in the community saw him as a symbol of oppression. His reputation for targeting minorities was no secret, but in Hale's mind, he was simply doing his job. As he passed an upscale restaurant, a sleek black luxury sedan caught his eye. Behind the wheel was a black woman, poised and confident, dressed in a sharp business suit. Hale felt a pang of irritation. To him, it was a mismatch. Someone like her in a car like that didn't belong. "What's she doing here?" Hale muttered under his breath, pulling his car into the lot and switching on his lights. Victoria Harper, a Supreme Court judge known for her relentless pursuit of justice, was on her way to pick up an order from her favorite restaurant. Her demanding schedule rarely allowed for a break, but today she'd carved out a moment of reprieve. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, she exuded authority and grace as she stepped out of her car. Hale's cruiser pulled up behind her with a screech. Startled but composed, Victoria turned to see the officer approaching. "Your papers!" Hale barked without so much as a greeting. His tone was sharp, bordering on hostile. Victoria furrowed her brow, but remained calm. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, reaching for her identification. "You're parked illegally," Hale lied, "and your behavior is suspicious." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I'm picking up my lunch order. I don't believe that violates any laws." Hale's jaw tightened. Her calmness was like a mirror, reflecting his insecurities back at him. "I need to know who you are, where you're from, and why you're here," he demanded, stepping closer. "You're overstepping, officer," Victoria said evenly, handing him her ID and car registration. "If I've done something wrong, please let me know." Hale glanced at her documents but ignored the prestigious title printed on them. To him, she was just another person he could intimidate. "Turn around. You're under arrest for suspicious behavior and disobedience," he snapped, grabbing her arm roughly. The midday sun beat down mercilessly as a small crowd began to form around the scene. The upscale restaurant's patrons and passers-by, some carrying shopping bags or walking their dogs, paused to watch the unfolding drama. Whispers rippled through the growing group, confusion giving way to outrage as they pieced together what was happening. Phones were raised, their lenses capturing the scene with precision. In an age of social media, every second mattered, and this moment was no exception. Officer Michael Hale, oblivious to the murmurs and recording devices, remained fixated on his target. Victoria Harper's calm demeanor only seemed to further stoke his anger. Her lack of visible fear, her audacity to meet his gaze with steady resolve, felt like an affront to his authority. "Turn around and face the car," Hale barked, his voice sharp and commanding. Victoria complied without resistance, her every movement deliberate and composed. Her face was pressed against the sleek black hood of her luxury sedan, the hot metal stinging her cheek. Hale yanked her arms behind her back, snapping the cold handcuffs around her wrists with unnecessary force. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly, her tone even but firm. "This will not end the way you think it will." The crowd's whispers grew louder. Among them were local residents who recognized Victoria, not just as a well-dressed professional, but as Judge Victoria Harper, one of the most respected figures in the state's judiciary. The knowledge of her identity spread quickly, and the mood in the crowd shifted from curiosity to indignation. "That's Judge Harper," someone muttered, the words carrying through the group. "She hasn't done anything wrong." Another voice chimed in. "What's this guy thinking? He's arresting a judge? Is he out of his mind?" The onlookers weren't just strangers. Some were members of the very community Victoria had served and protected through her rulings. People who had seen her fight for justice in courtrooms, who had benefited from her fair decisions, now watched in disbelief as she was treated like a common criminal. Across the street, a young woman in her early 20s stood frozen, her phone clutched tightly in her hand as she live-streamed the incident. Her voice trembled as she narrated for her growing audience. "This is happening right now," she said, the disbelief clear in her tone. "They're arresting Judge Harper. She's a Supreme Court judge. And for what? Parking her car?" The livestream's comment section began to fill with outrage. "Are you serious? A judge? This is why we need police reform. Get his badge number." The video spread like wildfire. Within minutes, hundreds of people were sharing the stream, tagging news outlets and calling for action. A local reporter stationed nearby received an alert on her phone and hurried to the scene, camera in hand. The tension in the air was palpable. A man in his 40s, dressed in a mechanic's uniform, stepped forward cautiously. His broad shoulders and grease-streaked hands marked him as a working-class local, but his voice carried authority. "Officer," he called out, his tone measured but firm. "What's the charge? What exactly did she do?" Hale shot him a glare, his hand hovering over his holstered weapon. "Stay back. This doesn't concern you." The man didn't flinch. "It concerns all of us when someone is treated like this for no reason." The crowd murmured in agreement, emboldened by his challenge. More voices joined in. "She hasn't done anything wrong. Let her go." "Why are you arresting her?" Hale's grip on Victoria tightened. He could feel the control of the situation slipping through his fingers. The weight of the crowd's eyes and their increasingly vocal protests bore down on him, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Step away," Hale barked, his voice cracking slightly as the tension rose. "This is a lawful arrest." Victoria, still restrained, turned her head slightly to address the crowd. Her voice, though soft, carried authority. "Please, everyone, remain calm. Let's not escalate this further." Her words did little to quell the crowd's indignation. If anything, her poise and restraint only fueled their anger at the injustice unfolding before them. Some began dialing 911 to report Hale's behavior, while others shouted for the police captain to intervene. Victoria's mind raced as she took in the scene around her. The crowd's growing support was a comfort, but she knew that this situation could spiral out of control if tempers flared. The last thing she wanted was for anyone to get hurt on her behalf. She took a slow, steady breath and addressed Hale directly. "Officer, I suggest you reconsider your actions. Detaining me without cause is a violation of my rights, and it will not stand." Hale's grip faltered for a moment as her words hit their mark. He glanced nervously at the phones pointed in his direction, realizing that every move he made was being documented. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he hissed, leaning closer to her ear. "Not today." Victoria didn't respond. She didn't need to. The weight of her presence, her unwavering calm in the face of such blatant hostility, was enough to unnerve him. The tension reached a boiling point when a teenage boy at the edge of the crowd shouted, "You're gonna regret this, man. She's a judge." Hale's head snapped toward the boy, his expression a mix of fury and panic. "Quiet down," he barked, his voice betraying his fraying composure. A woman in her 60s, holding her granddaughter's hand, stepped forward. "Officer, you're out of line," she said, her voice trembling with both fear and determination. "This isn't justice." The crowd began chanting, their voices rising in unison. "Let her go! Let her go!" Hale's pulse raced. The situation was slipping beyond his control, and for the first time, he felt a twinge of fear, not just for his reputation, but for what might happen if this spiraled further. By now, local news crews had arrived, their cameras rolling as they pushed through the crowd to capture the scene. A reporter with a microphone stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Officer Hale, can you explain why Judge Harper is being detained?" she asked, her tone sharp. Hale froze, his mind scrambling for an answer. The cameras turned toward Victoria, who met the reporter's gaze with calm intensity. "This officer is abusing his power," she said clearly, her voice carrying over the noise. "But let me assure you, justice will be served." The crowd erupted in applause, their cheers drowning out Hale's weak attempts to assert control. The officer's confidence crumbled entirely as the weight of public scrutiny bore down on him. The crowd continued to grow, their chants and shouts echoing through the streets. For Hale, the once quiet southern town was no longer a safe haven for his unchecked authority. The people were speaking up, their voices amplifying a story that would soon reach far beyond the town's borders. Victoria Harper, though temporarily restrained, was already turning the tide. Her quiet defiance and the crowd's unwavering support were the beginnings of a storm that would sweep through the town and force a reckoning long overdue. Captain James Morton arrived on the scene moments later. Known for his level-headedness, Morton immediately sensed the gravity of the situation. He spotted Victoria, handcuffed and surrounded by an angry crowd, his gut twisted with unease. "What's going on here, Hale?" Morton demanded, his voice sharp. I arrested her for suspicious behavior, Hale replied smugly. She was being uncooperative. Morton's eyes widened as he recognized Victoria. Do you have any idea who you just arrested? He asked, his voice low but firm. What does it matter? Hale sneered. Just another troublemaker who thinks she can talk back. Morton's expression hardened. That's Judge Victoria Harper, a Supreme Court judge for this state. Hale's face turned ashen. His confidence evaporated as the weight of his actions sank in. Morton immediately uncuffed Victoria, his hands trembling as he apologized. Judge Harper, I am deeply sorry for this egregious mistake, Morton said, his voice heavy with regret. Victoria stood tall, her composure unshaken. This isn't just a mistake, Captain. This is systemic, and it won't go unanswered. By the time Victoria returned to her car, the videos had gone viral. Within hours, the coerced justice for Harper was trending across multiple platforms. The footage of Hale's behavior was scrutinized by millions, sparking outrage nationwide. Local news stations picked up the story, and protests began forming outside the police station. Civil rights organizations rallied behind Victoria, using the incident to highlight the pervasive issue of racial profiling. The small southern town was thrust into the national spotlight. Captain Morton initiated an internal investigation, and Hale was placed on administrative leave. But the public demanded more than disciplinary action. They wanted systemic reform. Victoria, meanwhile, used her platform to call for justice. In interviews, she spoke eloquently about the deeper issues at play. This isn't just about one officer, she said during a primetime segment. It's about a culture that allows prejudice to thrive unchecked. Her words resonated, sparking a movement that extended far beyond the town's borders. Hale faced criminal charges for abuse of power and violating civil rights. The once proud officer became a pariah, his name synonymous with racial injustice. He resigned in disgrace, his career in law enforcement over. Under public pressure, the town implemented sweeping reforms. The police department introduced anti-bias training, established a community oversight board, and began collaborating with local leaders to rebuild trust. Victoria's determination turned a personal ordeal into a catalyst for change. She became a national symbol of resilience, inspiring others to stand against injustice. Months later, Victoria delivered a powerful speech at a national human rights conference. We cannot allow the abuse of power to persist, she declared. It's not enough to hold individuals accountable. We must dismantle the systems that enable them. Her speech was met with thunderous applause, solidifying her place as a leading voice in the fight for equality. Hale's name faded into obscurity, a cautionary tale of arrogance and prejudice. Meanwhile, Victoria's legacy continued to grow. Her efforts led to tangible change, not only in her town, but across the country. The incident served as a reminder that even in the face of adversity, one person's courage could ignite a movement. Victoria Harper's story became a beacon of hope, proving that justice, when pursued relentlessly, could prevail.